observations. We have Kirk and Jason and Scott here with us today. We're going to begin today picking up where we left off in our last program with a review of Psalm 91. For those who are new to listening to this program, Psalm 91 is how this all began for me about a decade, a little over a decade now, 15 years ago, when the 19 Muslims decided that they would do the ultimate suicide bombing and fly planes into two buildings in New York and one in Washington, D.C. And at the time, the nation was making every excuse they could for Islam, saying that these terrorists had corrupted their religion as opposed to the religion having corrupted them. The line is still being dispensed with reckless abandon in the liberal media. And at the time,
to George Bush at the time, he said that they blaspheme the name of Allah.
Oh, yeah, well, George Bush would be a real expert because he was the ultimate scoundrel. A man that claimed to be a Christian simply so that he could get elected. The moment he was no longer elected, he renounced all of that. Not that it would have made him any better to have been a Christian. Look at Ted Cruz and his constant array of dishonest dealings. The reality is that God hates religion. He hates all religion. There are no good religions. And Islam just happens to be the most overtly satanic of all religions. And there's 1.4 to 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. So God wanted the religion exposed and condemned. He wanted it to be made absolutely clear that Allah was modeled after Satan. Now, you can't blaspheme Satan. He is the adversary. Allahu Akbar is his ultimate fantasy, to be considered as greater than, older than, bigger than Yahowah, which is why the phrase was first conceived at the raid of Kabar. So when I was asked to expose and condemn Islam some 15 years ago, happened to be on Yahowah in 2001. The challenge, of course, was that no one has been successful in surviving doing that sort of thing, because Muslims respond with reckless abandon. Matter of fact, even today there was news of an imam in England praising a Muslim in Pakistan. A Muslim in Pakistan had been hired and trained by the military to guard a politician who had come to the conclusion that the blaspheme laws in Pakistan were way too repressive. If you say anything critical of Muhammad or Allah or Islam, you're sentenced to death. And so his bodyguard killed him, putting, I think it was 41 bullets into his body while he was shopping at a marketplace. So this is a rather deadly religion. Muhammad was a mass murderer. He was a ruthless terrorist. And so my immediate response to God when asked to expose and condemn it beyond I'm not qualified, and if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do it together because I'm not qualified to do it. And second, since they have a tendency to kill anyone who exposes the true nature of their religion and God, I'm here to say that you're going to need to protect my house. My home and family has to be a safe sanctuary. And number three, so that I don't rely on any of my own devices, since marketing was my primary skill set, I'm not going to market this. Whatever interviews, whatever notoriety this book and this message gets, going to be totally up to you. Well, now I have done 5,000 hours of talk radio. I think Yahowah has done a pretty fair job. And since I have never ducked for cover, never been physically attacked, even though I've received thousands of death threats, my home has indeed been a safe sanctuary. As for working together, well, You can read Prophet of Doom. It's free online at prophetofdoom.net, and you can ascertain for yourself if it is a work that that does the job of exposing and condemning Islam using Muhammad's own words and deeds. But as for that work, it immediately transitioned into Yahowah, the 7 volumes of Yahowah, to Questioning Paul, to an Introduction to God, and now Observations for Our Time. So when I was asked to do this and I negotiated with God, the answer to the negotiation was in my right hand pocket. It was the 91st Psalm, and it begins, "He who dwells, inhabits, and lives restored. He who approaches and remains, settles and established in his dwelling, within the protected place, which is carefully concealed for sight, inside the refuge and safe haven, the sanctuary, even the garment of Elyon, the Almighty, so as to be withdrawn, ascending to meet the light, and going up to visit the awe-inspiring while gaining status and splendor, in the shadow and resulting image, and therefore in the likeness and resemblance, as a copy or near duplicate, created by the light in one less dimension, as a result of being submerged in the protection and the successful empowerment, the prosperity of the Mighty One, the most expansive, capable, and influential one, with the ability to cultivate, to nourish, and to bless life. He will continually abide, dwelling for an extended period of time, remaining during the night. And he will lodge and live on an ongoing basis and therefore endure through the time of darkness, enduring those dark hours preceding the arrival of the light." Now that's the first statement. It is not the end of the sentence, but in it, as we considered before, it is God's promise to protect those who engage in what he wants done, and that he recognizes that we live in a dark time, and that his protection needs to continue through the darkness of this time. And then it goes on to say that, he is intending to empower us. The term that he used here suggests that we'll be made ever more in his likeness, which is really the key to doing anything successful, is being empowered by God. This goes on to say, who says, so you'll be made into the image of his life, nourished and blessed by Yahowah, who says, Yahowah, or who says to approach Yahowah, my trusted place, my refuge, my stronghold, my God, is the steadfast and constant one. In him I continually trust and rely. The key to being where Yahowah would like us to be is not just knowing his name, but knowing that what he has said is reliable because it never changes. And if we trust and rely on that which is trustworthy, then we will be right where he would like us to be, right where we should be. But now, that is, of course, a death knell to the religion that I was called to critique, as well as the one that I subsequently exposed and condemned a number of years later. If God is steadfast and constant, as this is saying, Yahowah, that he is natash, permanent, perpetual, imminent, continuous, and truthful, dependable, and steadfast. That means that there can be no Quran. Because why the Quran says that it confirms the Torah, that's laughable. It repudiates all of it and comes up with an entirely different and completely despicable message. It's literally the antithesis of the Torah. Well, it's not possible if God is consistent and dependable. And particularly in Islam's case, because Allah claims to be the God who inspired the Torah, which makes him an absolute laughingstock. You have to be an absolute ignoramus under these conditions to be a Muslim, to believe Islam, to consider it to be worthy. But the same thing would be true with the Christian New Testament. There can't be a New Testament that is different than the Old Testament if, in fact, God is consistent. And it further undermines the whole concept of a belief system. Religions are belief systems. They are based entirely on faith. Doubt is considered to be the enemy. You are told to believe. Now, you're not given any evidence, not any reasons to believe, only told that you must believe. You can read Paul's letters 1,000 times. You won't find anything in Paul's letters that would give you any credence, any confidence. You cannot know when there is no evidence. And so with religion, it is strictly a matter of beliefs, and yet here Yahowah said, because I am steadfast and truthful, you can trust and rely upon me. Now, trust is based on knowing. Reliance is based on understanding. When belief is necessary, trust and reliance are impossible.
Yeah. How could anyone have confidence in somebody you don't know anything about them? And you have no proof that they can fulfill the contract.
You know, if you read Paul's letters, he tells you nothing about his God. Nothing. He never quotes Yahowah accurately. He never once quotes Yosha. The one time he made a lame attempt to quote Yosha out of context, I mean, he completely butchered the quote. I mean, there's just no semblance between what he said and what Yosha said. So if you're going to create a caricature of God that models the image that you have of him, the real God can't be known. Now, in the case of Islam, there's a fair amount said about Allah, although the Quran specifically says that Allah cannot be known. So there you have it, and what little is said about Allah is depicts him in hell, torturing those who didn't submit to him. So he is depicted exactly as you would expect Satan.
So the fair enough assumption is that, and a lot of what the Knight Christon is saying here is that, from what we've come to know is that the shelter of Yah and his shadow is a place of enlightenment and understanding. I would like to just mention this, something that...
A place you enter through trust and reliance.
Yeah, a place you know. A place that you don't have to go in with your eyes closed and hope for the best. But, one thing jumped out at me in Genesis. One thing I like about, Bereshit. Bereshit tends to be, it's sort of the starting place, and then you can see echoes of it throughout the Torah, right? So one thing that jumped out at me was when man first was nourished by knowledge of good and evil. When they ate of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. The thing that jumped out at me is that he said that he heard the voice of Yahweh and he was afraid. And he hid himself. And I think that sums up what religion really is. The man's response to God in a state of fear. And if you look at all these dominating religions, that's always a theme. There's a fear of God.
Yeah. Of course, when Adam and Chawah were with Yahowah in the garden prior to being hoodwinked by Satan, and as Roy has written me in previous occasions, and I tried to include this in one of the most recent chapters, Satan did not come into the garden as a snake. He left as a snake. He did not come in that way. He came in glowing, beautiful. He would have been as beautiful as anything in the garden, maybe more beautiful than anything in the garden. And he didn't come in with an alternative plan. He didn't come in saying, hello, I'm Satan. I'm known as the adversary. This is who I really am. and what I want you to do is I want you to worship me. No, he knew Yahweh. He misquoted Yahweh, but he based his story on Yahweh's testimony taken out of context, truncated and twisted to derive a misunderstanding, to yield a misunderstanding, which is exactly what Pauline doctrine does. That's Galatians is written exactly in the manner that Satan fooled Adam and Yahowah. Now, also the thing that's interesting is that Satan would have come into the garden exactly as Satan appeared to Paul as flashing rays of light on the road to Damascus. And when there was no apple, there's no mention of an apple. It's as big a corruption, well, not as big a corruption as the name Eve, which is the name of a pagan sun goddess. It's Yahowah. But the fruit, that which provides nourishment of the knowledge of good and evil, means that man now knew bad. He knew what was errant, what was lifeless, what was wrong, he now was aware of what was religious, what was political, what was militaristic, what was, it wasn't just now man and Yahowah, man, woman, and Yahowah. Now it was all of the nastiness that permeates the world. And so they were now in a position where they would constantly have to choose one or the other. Free will would now prevail, as it did even in the choice to consume the fruit, but now they were aware of what was wrong. And
it says, too, that they knew that they were naked.
Yeah, and the naked was strictly that, and this is one of the things that I find fascinating. If you look at both Islam and Pauline Christianity, women have to cover themselves up. And Paul really disliked women. He was extraordinarily demeaning to women, as was Muhammad. Muhammad hated women. His harem was not a collection of wives that he loved, but instead a collection of women that he had absolute control over and that he could abuse. There were rape victims and pedophile victims that were part of his harem, but he made them cover up. When God was with Adam and Yahowah, they didn't need clothing. They're beautiful. God doesn't think there's anything wrong with the human body. Nothing at all.
They weren't, suddenly they became self-conscious, or they became ashamed of their...
They became ashamed of who they had become. And so they...
I just thought it was interesting that, like, religion, they all have the same symptoms, being that they really do have a fear of God, and that's right there at the beginning of the story.
It's like they needed to hide from God.
Right.
Yeah, they had something they needed to hide from God. Well, before they had the knowledge of good and evil, there was nothing they needed to hide from God or from one another.
So religion is a shelter for them, but it's a shelter from God.
Correct.
Another thought, let me throw at you, is Yahweh always encourages you to scrutinize what he says, his claims. I mean, obviously Adam and Yahweh talk to him all the time and say, well, what about that? What's this? And such and such and such. The Lord's, all these gods that man makes or Satan becomes, they require total faith. They don't take questioning. That's why we've lost so many Christian fans. If we talk to them about what y'all really said, they view us as a threat.
Right. Yeah.
Because I say, well, let's scrutinize it together. You tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But that doesn't satisfy them. They just get away.
Yeah. Yeah, the Quran in the last lines of the 5th surah, which was the last that was revealed chronologically, says those who question the Quran lose their faith. And indeed, anyone who looks at the Quran with a questioning mind will lose their faith in Islam. It's the dumbest and worst book and the most immoral, bloodthirsty, terrorist dogma ever written. And it's repulsive from beginning to end. And so, that's, if you're not willing to question. Now, I'm going to tell you that I think there is a 0% possibility that Adam and Yahowah didn't have a conversation with Yahowah about the 2 trees in the center of the garden. And say, okay, you got those trees there. Why are those trees there? Why are there instructions on those trees and nothing else in the garden? They had that discussion. And I'm certain Yahowah would have said to them that you need to have the opportunity to rebel, to reject me. I want to have a relationship with you. I want it to be mutually beneficial. I want it to be mutually enjoyable. And the only way to accomplish that is for you to have the choice to disengage in a relationship.
And in a sense, would the relationship be as significant if there wasn't that knowledge of evil, like if there wasn't that separation and then the reconciliation afterwards?
Yeah, and
more meaningful in that way.
I think so.
I would say so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think when you know the alternative, the relationship becomes more meaningful. I think the Torah is more meaningful because it shows both sides. I don't know what the consequence is of choosing religion and what the benefits are of choosing a relationship. I think that it is absolutely beneficial to know both sides. So then this goes on to say, surely he will defend, extricate, and deliver you from the contrived plots and the entrapment leading to be under the control of those who bait their traps to entice, luring their prey from the epidemic and deadly plague of written and spoken declarations of destructive and malicious threats. Well, this has really two levels of insight. The first is that I was looking just to have my home be a safe sanctuary, and the first line resolves that. This says that that if you're going to do something that Yahowah wants done, then he's going to defend us. He's going to deliver us from personal attack. And in the case of Islam, if you're going to expose and condemn it, you are going to have people who conspire to trap you, people who conspire to control you. They're going to scheme against you. And you're going to find people by the hundreds of thousands doing this. And you'll even find, if you expose Islam, not if you expose Christianity, but certainly if you expose Islam, the politically correct amongst secular socialist humanists, they will be strategizing to demean you, setting a trap for you. And what's interesting here is that with both, their initial onslaught is a war of words. It's a deadly spoken and written declarations, destructive and malicious threats. I don't think that I ever had anyone who was a Muslim write me and say, I think you made your best effort here, and boy, this is a 1,000-page analysis, Prophet of Doom, and it is extraordinarily well documented, and it was a masterful job taking the Quran and rearranging it chronologically so that you could put it into the context of Muhammad's life. But I think that you erred in the following ways. But otherwise, I think you meant well. You just you came to an invalid conclusion here, there, and the other place by the fact you didn't consider such and such. Never once. Now, I had hundreds of thousands of letters from Muslims around the world. No, every one of them began the same way, using language that isn't fit for any program anywhere. It's not even fit for the human mouth. And so they were all vicious threats, most of them talking about the relative morality of my mother. And then they would go from these malicious threats, slander, if you will. And then most of it was trying to be demeaning. They would call me Jewish. I wish I was. I'm not. I'm Sioux Indian and Irish. But I'm not. That I was money grubbing, doing it for money, and I've lost money on this enterprise. I give the books away free. And they would say that, you really are, that Islam is true, so why would you, write such a thing? Well, if I knew it was true, I certainly wouldn't write this. And then, they'd call you an Islamophobe, and you say, wait a minute, how can I be afraid of Islam if I have the courage to expose and condemn it? But it was all just vicious slander, destructive, malicious slander. And the 20 or so people out of thousands who would say, you translated this incorrectly. You'd go through and say, no, here's, I appreciate you bringing that up, but let's go through it. Here's the 5 most popular translations, and here's what they say. So no, I didn't mistranslate it. And then you'd hear the slander, well, you don't speak Arabic, so there's no way for you to know. Well, then what about this issue? The first is that the Quran really isn't written in Arabic. The Arabic alphabet is Hebrew. Same number of letters. They are the same letters. Same vowel, same consonants. It's the same alphabet. And most of the words in Arabic are actually Hebrew words, including Quran. Quran is from the Hebrew kara, with the exact same meaning, to read and to recite. So if you don't know Hebrew, you're in a position where you probably wouldn't know the Quran. But that would also be the argument of saying, you want to tell me that Arabic is a language so impoverished that it's the only language in the world that can't be translated into English or any other language? It's the only language in the world that is so impoverished that it only has meaning in Arabic and no other language. So it was a war of words.
Yeah, plus if there was holes in Prophet of Doom, I mean, IQ, you have IQ that was on Shattering Mist many times too, and he speaks the language.
Yeah, IQ.
The fact is that I used the 5 most popular Quran translations and blended them to create the Prophet of Doom translation. So it's you can't. The claim is invalid. In fact, in the course of the 10 years that I used to respond to emails from Prophet of Doom, I haven't been there in over 5 years now. There wasn't a single complaint that was valid. Not one. Now, this is a 1,000-page book. You would expect to have gotten some things wrong. It's a 1,000-page book. There wasn't a single meaningful complaint about a translation that was actually valid. And all of those years and all of that time. Now, the second aspect of this particular passage that strikes home with me is that all religion really is destructive, deadly, epidemic, and slanderous words. Religion is a long diatribe of maliciousness, and it is based upon the ruinous, spiteful, malevolent, mischievous, calamitous yearnings of those who conceive religions and promote them. That's what religion is. If you are the least bit open-minded, rational, and informed, and you read the Christian New Testament, particularly Paul's letters, and you compare them to the God he claims inspired him, the God who Yahowah said that he represented, they are the antithesis of one another. They're exact opposites. They both can't be true. I'd like to speak a little bit about the pervasiveness of the destructive and malicious threats that have become an epidemic and deadly plague, luring and enticing the unwary to their demise. Paul's letters, according to Yahowah, and according to any historical review, are the deadliest of all time. Today, the religion that he contrived with his 13 debilitating epistles has become a worldwide epidemic, which is precisely what God said when he was talking about how the little horn would grow out of the dying Roman Empire to become the nastiest beast that the world had ever known, that beast would trample upon the whole world. Well, it is the largest worldwide epidemic ever. There are 2.3 billion Christians today, 1.2 billion of which are Roman Catholics, 900 million are Protestants, and just shy of 300 million are Orthodox. Now, this 2.3 billion, just to look at when God said, at the end of all of this, when, he finally says that Babylon has fallen and that the whore of Babylon is no more, but that he is just a moment before that still trying to call his people out of Babylon, that if you go back just 100 years ago, that there were just 600 million Christians a century ago. 600 million a century ago. Today there are 2.3 billion. In fact, there are more people plagued with the Pauline pestilence today than in the preceding 19 centuries combined. 2.3 versus 2.1 billion. Christianity wouldn't claim 100 million souls until the 8th century. Another 500 million would be infected with Paul's poison pen by the conclusion of the 15th century. Over the next 4 centuries, culminating with the 19th centuries, Paul's letters would damn 900 million additional souls. Overall, 4.4 billion people have lost their souls as a direct result of the pathetic diatribe of one man, which is why Yahowah predicted of him, saying, "This soul, Shaul, is the plague of death." Words kill. So that is a sobering reminder that when Yahowah makes a prophecy, as he did in Daniel, he is precise. Yes, Jason.
I was going to say, you were speaking the other day when we were on BTR, and how a good friend of yours actually was, trying to, convince you not to investigate Paul.
Yeah.
And,
in fact, left me our friendship. We parted when I did. Yeah.
That's a snare as well.
Yes.
And you may have lost a friend there, but I just want to say he didn't, because you stayed true to the facts. You're still being honest with him.
It is a
a
challenge to actually view Paul with an open mind is about the most difficult thing one can do today. Now, I'd say almost. I still think that to intellectually, to rationally, to systematically and methodically expose and condemn Muhammad, Allah, and Islam based upon the words and deeds of Muhammad is the most difficult thing a person can do today. And that's for 2 reasons. One is the material itself is so dark, it's so demented, it's so putrid that every day you spend in it, and I invested 10,000 hours in it, every moment you're in it is just nasty. But the second thing is that the world, both Muslims who are vicious towards those who do so, and socialist secular humanists, which is socialist secular humanism, is the world's 3rd most popular religion. Atheism, agnosticism, humanism, socialism, collectively, that's the world's 3rd largest religion. they are also vicious. So I would say that exposing and condemning Islam is the most difficult thing a person can do. It is most prone to being enticed into a trap. But second to that would be exposing Christianity. It is something that is extremely difficult to do, and it's one of the things that's difficult about it is the culture itself. You're in an environment where it isn't even conceivable for most people that a man who is considered to be St. Paul, who is the author of half of the Christian New Testament, could have been a fraud.
Yeah, that's when the fear mechanism kicks in, I think.
Yes, it does.
You go back to that people think they're saved under that umbrella, and then to consider it false kind of puts them back in a
right. It undermines their foundation, undermines everything that they have believed. Every nuance of their life is, they're going to see their dearly departed in heaven again. They think it's not, but it's not true. Oh my God! Then what?
Yeah, he provides first fear of the Torah, and then he provides a shelter in his rubbish.
Yes.
And people become accustomed to it. And, unless you're actually looking for the truth and you want to know God, you want to have a relationship, you're probably not going to take that step.
No, and as I can tell you that as I started on the second book, the 91st Psalm I viewed as just God's affirmation that we would work together and that he would keep my home as a safe sanctuary. And exposing, and exposing and condemning Islam. It turned out to be the same set of promises and the same method that we would use to expose Christianity. And it turned out that by coming to know the ploy that Muhammad used to hoodwink and beguile the first Muslims, that it turned out to be the same ploy that Paul used. These men are extraordinarily similar. Their testimony is extraordinarily similar. So when someone says the God of the Bible is the same as the God of the Quran, they're a nincompoop, because the God of the Bible is a terrible term, but 80% of what's called the Bible is the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and Yahowah and Allah are exact opposites. So you have to be a complete nincompoop to buy that. And then if you realize that, in the Christian New Testament, and you have to take out Yahowah and Revelation, as being clearly the words and the deeds of Yahusha. But if you deal with the Pauline God and compare the Pauline God to the Quranic God, they're the same. They are the same. Satan is the Lord is both. Satan is one and the same. That part is absolutely true.
Well, Christians further have that end time. They know it's in the end times. And nobody's that stupid has read any prophecy. They know this has got to be it.
Yes.
But they also believe that anybody approaches you that tries to shake your faith, which is never asked for. They think you're Satan in disguise.
Yeah, that is both the Quran and the Pauline New Testament.
Yeah.
The Torah, prophets, and Psalms, by the way, never make that claim. Never make that claim. Ever. Don't even hint at it. But in the Pauline letters and in the Quran, it is constantly, Satan is constantly bashed, and it's said that anybody who questions the author, Paul or Muhammad's veracity, is of Satan.
Yep.
And so they immediately go to that position. And it was actually by reading Morals and Dogma. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Morals and Dogma, but it's the moral code of Freemasonry. And by reading Morals and Dogma and dealing what you're finally told as a 33rd degree Mason, and why the Shriners have every sign and symbol of the Shriners is Islamic, is because the Satan, who is the god of Freemasonry, the god of every religion, that Satan says, I want to be known as the light bearer. I don't want to be known as Satan. I don't want to be known as the adversary. Satan doesn't want to be respected as the adversary. He doesn't want to be worshipped as the adversary. He wants to be worshipped and seen as God. And the moment you see that, you can see why the Pauline letters and why the Quran demeans Satan and assumes anybody who is contrary to the religion is satanic, is because that is what Satan is trying to avoid. It's what he's trying to disassociate with. It's what he doesn't want known. And so it becomes quite clear that the reason that these lines exist in the Christian New Testament and Paul's letters and in the Quran is Satan wants to be known as the Lord. He wants to be seen as the God, as Allahu Akbar, as Allah is greater and greatest, and not as the adversary, which is what Satan means. And that's one of the reasons why understanding what Hebrew words mean gives great insight to an individual. And, if Satan wasn't known as the adversary, you could say, okay, well, maybe he wants to be worshipped under his title. But no. That is not the case.
Once you got somebody to be afraid of God, you can pretty much tell them whatever you want.
Yep, absolutely. And once you demean God's testimony,
clever on this side of things, from what I know now, I don't think Paul's that clever. But
no, I don't either.
That is ignorant of the Torah, then it's a little.
I had a reason in one of the recent chapters of Observations for Our Time to cite a better part of a chapter of Timothy. I think it was 1 Timothy. And it was written, almost every statement in it had a counterpart in the Quran. So what proves your point is that a satanically inspired individual, Muhammad and Paul, both admitted that they were satanically inspired. Read the conclusion of the second letter to the Corinthians. And when you're dealing with Satan, he isn't that clever. He certainly isn't creative. And so it's just one regurgitated corruption after another. And every time, he never comes up with a new creative idea out of whole cloth that says, my idea is such and such, and my idea is better. No, it's always a corruption, a counterfeit, a whitewashing of what God says, because he's looking to gain credibility, right? And he hasn't the ability to conceive something new, something better, so he just simply corrupts and twists and perverts what God has said. That's why the term Babel is so enlightening. It means to twist, to pervert, to corrupt.
And Yahweh didn't make them creative,
No, I don't think he would have been as successful if people didn't, if they didn't fear God.
Correct. Yeah. The Quran says, "He who fears will obey."
Mm-hmm.
That is the nature.
Both Paul and Muhammad were both put in that position. They were both
right. And of course, Paul was extraordinarily threatening.
Oh yeah.
And so he even talked about wanting to castrate people. That if he said that if you were Torah observant and were in concurrence with God's insistence upon circumcision, then he says, just soon you be castrated.
Yeah. And if anybody, even a Malak, comes with any message to damn them to hell.
That's right.
Other than his message.
Of course. Yeah, it is amazing. So this goes on to say, with his wing, his Ibra, his winged beings. So it could be with his wing. And, that is a metaphor that Yah uses throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms as a mother bird under his wing. Under his wing. But it's also, Ibra would be a winged being. The Malach are winged beings. And it means it's from, Ibra is from Abar, which means the ability to take flight, to soar, and to ascend to the heavens. And the only difference between Abar and Ibra is the feminine aspect of Yahweh's nature, describing these spiritual beings. He will cover you, shielding you from attack, and clothe you in a way that promotes your approach and growth. Ha'ak law. He will directly and indirectly provide a suitable defense from attackers, a barricade that makes you inaccessible, forming the protective structure by weaving together the cloth and knitting the threads in the fabric to bring you together with him. It was the Hiphil Yiptol imperfect, which means that God is empowering those he is assisting such that they are participating in this relationship, and so that the results are ongoing, unfolding throughout time. So this is a significant promise. Now, later he's going to say that he is specifically assigning Malach to protect us, but this is his winged beings will cover you. They're going to shield you from attack. They're going to clothe you in such a way that it promotes your approach and your growth. Because we have to approach Yahweh. We have to be in his proximity to convey his message. And we're still flawed. So this is positive from that point of view, but it's also shields us from attack. When I did the 3,000 just radio interviews as a guest, an expert guest on Islam, I did 2,998 of them the same way. And the deal I made with Yahowah specifically was, I'll prepare, I'll be ready. I will do the research. I will be willing to talk to anyone, anywhere, bluntly and boldly on this subject. But because there are debate fallacies, rhetoric fallacies that render evidence and reason moot amongst those in an audience who don't understand rhetoric, who are unfamiliar with logic. The deal that I made was that he would preclude those kinds of interviews, because all I was going to do, I was prepared to approach the subject of Muhammad, Allah, and Islam using evidence and reason. But if somebody says, hey, I know a Muslim, and that Muslim's a nice guy, and I can't believe that all Muslims are terrorists, and they go on to this you're being hateful. They take that approach. It appeals to an ignorant audience, and they have no idea that it has no bearing whatsoever on the evidence, and it's not rational. And so I did 2,998 interviews in a row. But anyone taking that most popular approach to dismissing evidence and reason. Then I had 2 in a row where that was the host's entire diatribe, and they were just mean and hateful about it. And so I went to God and said, we had a deal. These last 2 interviews fell outside of that deal. And he said, they did. That is correct. I said, we must be over. Oh, but we're just beginning. We were over with Islam. We had done, there was nothing more to say. I had said it, I had written it, there was nothing more to say, there was nothing more to be done. That job, that mission was completed. And we were off to a new mission, which is when Yada Yah began. So this idea of providing a defense, I did hundreds of debates and thousands of shows. He was always there with the right thing to say at the right time. So this goes on to say, so under his wing, by way of his winged beings, he will cover you, shielding you from attack and clothe you in a way that promotes your approach and your growth. And under his wings, the extremity of his garments, and in his corner, kanaf can be any one of those 3 things. It can mean speak of apparel. It can speak of wings. It can speak of his messengers. It can speak of being in his corner, like in the case of a fighter. You will rest. His reliable and dependable nature upon you is a large shield to keep you cool and collected. You know what it's like to speak words that no one wants to hear? And to have angry people condemning you when you try to do it, who know nothing. They're just slandering politically correct jargon and opinions, and never once losing your cool, not in 3,000 hours of doing this. You know, I think that in the Blog Talk Radio before Shattering Myths, which was like 4 years, and then the 3 years of Shattering Myths, and then the time since, I think I only lost my cool once.
I remember.
Once. And there's a lot of stupid things people said. Only once. And I lost my cool. It was I don't even remember what the subject was, but what I recall is that it was talking to somebody promoting Pauline Christianity, and you would point out something that God said that was in conflict with their religion, and rather than acknowledging that, they just go on and restate their statement. Then you'd say, well, your statement is disproved by God and him saying such and such. And then they would continue to restate their statement. And you go, and you do this like 5 times, and you say, you know, I'm beating my head against the wall. Yeah, enough already. And so, you know, I think that's one of the things that God wants to convey. He wants us to be cool under fire. You know, you look at Yahowah. Yahowah was really sharp. He had a sharp tongue. He was blunt. He was bold. You know, this lovey-dovey, we shouldn't use hate speech. And his speech was laced with hate. Laced with hate. He hated the religious establishment. He hated the militaristic establishment. He hated the Romans. He hated them. And he spoke. He let them have it.
But you know, the words he spoke,
he was always cool. Always cool under fire.
You know, like, what do you say to a religious person that's all tossed up and has got a swelled head?
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a shock method, but you know, he's still compassionate, even though he let him have it. Like, he just laid it out. One-liners that there was no answer to.
He did, though, something that I found that I had to do. And the only time I didn't do it is when I lost my cool the one time in all of these, 7,000-8,000 hours of radio talk, is that every time that he engaged people, he would engage 2 or 3 people. He would, say, listen, I'm going to do this for you, but only so that you'd have an appreciation that I have the power to do much more than this. And you're interested in your body, and I can do this for your soul. And that's the only reason I'm doing it. And, and he would, they'd ask him questions, and he'd say, why are you asking me that question? Question's been answered for you. What does it say? And, and even like the guys to Emmaus, on the road to Emmaus, he said, you guys are just idiots. How come you can't figure this out? I mean, this is what it says in the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms. Can't you make the connection? But you know what he did 100% of the time? He would have contact with 1 or 2, the most 3 people. And even just for short bursts, and then he'd walk away. He'd go away so that they didn't even know where he was. He would just disappear from them. So rather than constantly trying to engage them and engaging them in an ongoing dialogue, he'd give them both barrels, say what he had to say, and he was gone.
Yeah, there's really, like, when you're a Christian, there's all this anxiety about, delivering people from hell, and it's a totally different scenario in that, like you have mortal life, there's destruction, and there's,
I think it's part of this. I never thought of it this way before. I always thought of it, Jason, as that too much of man's rhetoric would just wear you down. It gets to be depressing. It gets you nowhere. A man gets all wrapped up in things. But I think maybe that the answer is something along the lines of what you're saying, which is that if you're God, if you take it from his perspective, the only way to actually get to know him and to understand what he's offering so that you can respond to the terms and conditions of his covenant and meet with him on his 7 invitations to meet and be called out. The only way to do that is to quietly and with great diligence turn to his Torah, prophets, and Psalms and study them, think about them, and with an open mind, make the connections so that you come to know, understand, so that you're able to trust and rely. And that can't be done if you're engaging in debate.
Yeah, well, I mean, debate can be okay, I think, as long as, because, you know, like,
Can you name a single debate that Yahowah engaged in?
Well, I mean, there was debates between Yahusha. You know, Yahowah uses rhetorical questions at times.
Yeah, I don't think debate is a question
when he's appealing to somebody's intellect. But
yeah, I just don't see him engaging in debate. I think he engaged in very brief question and answer.
Mm-hmm.
They would be asked a question, he would provide an answer. But debate?
Yeah.
He would not be lured into him.
I understand what you mean now. It's not debate in that you're not, like, it's not your goal to convince somebody of something.
No.
It's more like laying it out, take it or leave it.
Right.
And so the person who is, you know, under the shelter of observing the Torah, there's no obligation there for them. They're not, like, they're still liberated, even though they're in the midst of, you know, Babylon, you know, so.
Correct. So this is God saying, I'm going to cover you. I'm going to promote you. I'm going to put you in my corner. You're going to be adorned with my garments, and it's my reliable nature that's going to be a shield that keeps you cool and collected. And this is all because he says that his steadfast, consistent, and firm and reliable nature is a valuable defender.
You know, in the first verse, he uses, you know, in the translations he uses the word shadow. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was a reference to when Israel was leaving Egypt. But when I'm looking at the word here, I don't see a reference to it in Exodus.
Yeah. I think that when God talks about in the shadow, the Salim is the word, and it means in the likeness. So
is it the same word that's used in image?
Yes. Yeah, it's an image. It's an image word. Yeah. It's the word that appears in the first statement of this psalm. God's saying that for those who trust and rely on him by name and who seek to live with him in his shelter, that they will be made in his image. So it's in the first statement of Psalm 91. Now it goes on to say, I saw my mighty one dwelling upon I should say here, just a brief interlude. I really should have prefaced this. I really was trying to define now this word, because this is a very interesting word. Is God telling us that He is twice that He's got us under His wings, because you have Ibra, which is winged beings, and Kanaf, which is primarily translated wings. But there's places where it's translated the extremity of his gardens and other garments, and other places where it's translated in his corner, like in a boxing match where you'd be in your corner. So this is just an interesting word, and while we don't have to understand the word in its entirety to understand God's promise, the more that we look, the more interesting I think it is. So when God said that he was going to put us under his kanaf, did he mean under his wings, under the extremity of his garments, or in his corner? Either way, it's his reliable and dependable nature is the large shield to keep you cool and collected, and his steadfast and consistent and firm and assured reliability is your valuable defender. Pause now and reflect on this. So, as I began to think of it, I said, all right, I'm going to look up every time that kanaf is used. And it is used as a bird's wing, as the extremity of a garment, or in a special corner. Kanaf is used to describe the appendage of a bird used to facilitate flight and speaks of a wing. There's a similar word in the Akkadian language, the Aramaic language, and the Ugarit language, which denote both speed and protection. In Hebrew, nouns are defined by their verbal and actionable roots. With this in mind, the verbal root of kanaf, scribed yikanaf, is used only once. In Yahowah, Isaiah 30:20, it reads, those who gave the bread of adversity and the water, or Yahweh gave the bread of adversity and the water of affliction. And to those they were removed and put into a corner, assembled there and thrust aside, so that they shall not be his teachers. So this was a special corner that Yahweh isolated individuals who were working against him, who were working adversarially against him. And so that would have to be in a special corner. This was done so that your eyes shall see your teachers. This is somewhat reminiscent of one saying, I'm in your corner, while a rival would be found in the corner of another. In Malachi 3:20, a prophecy regarding Yosha is foretold as the greater light of creation's fourth day, having the sun of righteousness rising with healing in his kanaf. Now, does that mean in his wings, corner, or hem of his garment? Now, it's typically translated wings, but its fulfillment was the hem of his garment. Remember when he was walking and a woman reached out and touched the hem of his robe, and by touching the hem of his garment, she was healed? So the fulfillment wasn't in him having wings, because he didn't have wings. The fulfillment was the hem of his garment. So I'd rather be under the hem of Yahweh's garment, because that's a garment of light that's comprised of the Torah and the set-apart spirit, than I would to be under wings. But I'm happy to be under Yahweh's wings. He promised that, and he promised and protected by his winged beings. But why would he say wings twice? So I think hem of the garment is the natural conclusion. Now, since this is, I think it's interesting anyway, let's pause a moment longer and examine some of the additional thought-provoking insights into the potential nature of kanaf. Here in Yahowah 6:1-3, it is the wing. Is it the wing or the extremity of a special garment, or is it a blend of both? An apparatus and apparel which enables upward mobility and the soaring freedom of flight. This is how it reads. It says, I saw my upright one dwelling upon his throne, raised up and lifted up. The hem of the train of his robe filled the prevailing sanctuary. Seraphim were standing from above to approach him, bleached white, or it could be 6, wings or borders of the garments. This is kanaf for each one. With 2, they concealed their mouth, their face, their appearance, or presence. With 2, they covered their feet, and with 2, they flew. So then they called out an invitation to each other. Most set apart, Yahweh, of the conscripts who served with assigned roles, is what fills the totality of the land with his glory, his splendor, and his power, as well as his presence. So here the kanaf is Yahweh's garment, and it is directly associated with the Malach, the seraphim in this case, the spiritual messengers and envoys of Yahweh. It's directly associated with Yahweh's glory, His nature, His very presence in heaven. And it's beautiful and white. So, an interesting thought. So, while this was...
Also, you can consider the Torah and the garment of light. It is a shelter in a dark world.
Yeah, it is.
And they come out of a dark place, and it's a shelter.
You want to pierce the darkness, read the Torah.
And everything becomes more clear.
Right. You want to survive the darkness, rely on the Torah. It says, you should not, this is now returning to Psalm 91, we're in the 5th verse. You should not ever be in awe of or afraid, neither fearing nor revering any aspect of terrorism or dread this darkness because of a projectile shot flying by day. All right, so this, I looked at this as, at the time, and I still do. This psalm is very personal to me. That doesn't mean that it's not also personal to Kirk and to Jason and to Scott. I think that the Torah, prophets, and psalms were written to be personal to all of us. They apply directly to each and every one of us individually, as well as collectively. So I'm not being presumptuous when I said this was written for me. And as I read it, written for me at the time, it says, don't be afraid of the fact that Muslims will threaten to shoot you. Don't be afraid that Muslims will threaten to terrorize you. You should never be in awe nor afraid, fearing or revering. And don't respect the religion either, just because it's big and powerful and that some of its proponents have lots of money. Don't respect any aspect of its terrorism or the dread this darkness because of a projectile flying by day. Never once, Doctor. Never. I think I'm the only person who ever wrote to expose and condemn Islam this vociferously, this directly, this systematically, who did so under their own name. Did all those radio shows under my own name.
You're the only one that's not hiding out.
And not hiding out at all. Have no protection other than Yahweh. It's more than enough. So that was personal, and it
very
yeah. So Muslims commit 99% of the world's terrorist acts. Their Quran is the product of a depraved man, a rapist, a pedophile, a mass murdering terrorist who deliberately twisted Talmud readings to distort them to promote his deadly religion. And yet I took him on and lived to tell the tale. This says, I'm going to repeat the opening line because all of this follows from it. Our minds no longer in long sentences can remember the opening clause. So I'm going to repeat the opening clause. You should never be in awe of or afraid, neither fearing nor revering the contagious plague, the infectious pestilence, that fatal pandemic that ravages and robs, ransacking and raiding at midday, or the pestilence, the epidemic of sickening words prompted by the thorn that travels about without light.
Sure, that's not the thorn in Paul's side.
Yeah,
That's what I have in my notes.
yeah, I view that as the case. I think the thorn because there's no thorn associated. Well, there are some thorns associated with Muhammad in the Quran. The Quran says that those who don't surrender and submit to Allah will be forced to eat thorn bushes. And they'll have molten pitch poured down their throats. Allah will pour boiling water on them to boil off their skin and then give them a new skin so he can do it again. And just watch him scream. Yeah, Allah is such a loving God.
What a fella.
Yeah, he's a really good guy. So don't be afraid of them. Yes, and when it talks about robbing and ransacking and raiding, the first official act in the Islamic era, Muhammad finally flees Mecca in shame after becoming a laughingstock from the satanic verses, which are true. Muhammad acknowledged the Kaaba's goddesses to enrich himself and to empower himself with the Meccans, and then he was laughed out of town. And then he claimed that he flew on a wild ass from Mecca to Jerusalem and was in the temple, which of course had been destroyed 600 years earlier, but he was too stupid to know that. And of course he then says with the wild ass he jumped from the temple, which was non-existent, up to heaven, but on the way to Allah's heaven he had to go through hell, where he saw women, where the vast population of hell, and they were hanging by their breasts from meat hooks, I guess, and they were hanging there because they weren't grateful to their husbands. And so he this wild Barak ride where he just like Paul, Paul says, I can't tell you if I did it in body or in spirit, but I can't tell you how many heavens. I can't tell you if it really happened, or I can't even tell you what occurred there. The Quranic and hadith accounts of Muhammad's trip to heaven read just like Paul's in 2 Corinthians. But so here you've got this contagious plague that is being inspired by, and the point I was getting to, by those who are ravaging, robbing, ransacking, and raiding. As Muhammad flees Mecca, the first thing that he does in Yathrib is he raids a Meccan caravan. With a bunch of armed hoodlums, he commits an act of armed robbery. And the Quran in the 8th Surah admits that he went there strictly for the loot. He needed the money, and he thought that rather than earn it, he was going to steal it. And the Quran is clear. He went there for the loot, and the 8th Surah begins, stealing is lawful and good. And so Islam was conceived as a criminal enterprise. And once you realize that the first act of Islam in the Islamic era was armed robbery, where Muhammad admits that he did it solely because he wanted to steal what belonged to others, and that he ransacked the caravan and murdered the businessmen, and then butchered their bodies and then gloated over them. Just because that is the nature of this beast, and that is something most people would fear. Don't fear it. But he has described Islam.
Also, I think, oh man, I don't have my computer in front of me, unfortunately, but I don't know if it's which part of the Torah it's in, but I think Yah actually instructs Israel not to fear false prophets. Oh,
of course. Yeah, in fact, one of the things that's in the Torah is that when God lists abominations, there's not a lot of abominations, but one of the abominations is to God is fraud in business, stealing from others, robbing from others. God's very clear. You do not defraud others. Don't steal. In fact, it's one of the 10 statements that he etched in stone. Now, if you want to bring Paul into this, well, I was reading this as Yah's affirmation that I would survive the criticism of Islam and that we'd work together. But if you look at Pauline Christianity, Paul writes that he robbed certain of his churches. He literally uses the term rob. I robbed them.
Well, he's under grace, so
Yeah, he is under grace, all right. And guess where they are? So the thorn here, I think, is that the robbing, ransacking, and raiding is primarily Islam. The pestilence of the sickening words prompted by the thorn, well, that's Paul's poison pen, where he says that the thorn in his side was a messenger from Satan.
Yeah.
You know what I found with the beer as well?
What's that?
Well, obviously it's epidemic and plague, and then there was a word in one of the translations that said a moraine, and I didn't know what a moraine was, so I looked it up. It's foot and mouth disease.
that could be true of really any religion. Pauline Christianity. He's constantly got his foot in his mouth. That's the thing that's interesting about Yahowah, is that he walks the walk and talks the talk. What he said he is going to do, and what he says we should do, is what he does. When he says you should walk the walk of the Moed Mikre, that's the walk that he walked. When he walked his children out of Egypt, that's the path they followed. When he arrived in year 4000 Yah, 33 years before year 4000 Yah, he specifically walked the walk of the Mikre. He says what he's going to do, and he does what he says. But you look at the Pauline epistles, and Muhammad, he was always an exception to his own rules.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You look at Muhammad. He had a whole harem, little girls that were sex slaves, and Jews that were rape victims. He had this whole harem, and so when he spoke to Allah about how many wives someone could have, limited to 4. Except for you, Muhammad, you could have as many as you want.
Mm-hmm.
Always an exception to his own rule.
Yeah. Still, I don't know about. I think as far as Paul goes, I mean, it's a bigger fish to fry.
Yeah,
one of the biggest themes as far
he is the biggest of all fishes to fry. Yeah. He is the biggest fish to fry. I mean, that's the reason why I went through the numbers on Christianity, is that there is no religion in human history that even approaches the number of souls condemned.
He's the greatest killer.
Yeah, so he's the greatest killer of souls in all of human history by stunning margins. With Jews, at any one time there may be 15 to 20 million Jews on the planet. Well, there's 2.3 billion Christians.
Yeah. And just so, on the theme, and it's a rather big theme in the last days, about the remnant of Israel returning to the land, returning to the covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Not just of the tribe of Judah,
mm-hmm.
but the rest of Israel, right? I think, the majority of them would be coming out of a Christian heritage.
Yeah. Certainly Christian countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm out right now translating the first chapter of Yahowah, and he's speaking of the northern kingdom burning and being ravaged by the Assyrian invaders. And he said that Yahowah specifically says that had he not left a remnant, then you would be like Sodom and Gomorrah. And so he is the remnant. So there really is a remnant of the 10 tribes that were destroyed and hauled away into captivity in Assyria. There is a remnant that Yahowah maintained of those 10 tribes, in addition to, of course, Yehuda. I don't know if he has much to say for Benjamin, but I guess there will be a remnant even of Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
So then this says, 1,000 may fall, prostrating themselves, possibly even die, being cast down, away from your proximity. Many thousands more as a result of your right hand, but this will not strike you.
Wow.
So here you have a warning that a lot of people are going to fall. But they're not going to fall immediately in my proximity. And you look at just the most recent uprising of fundamentalist Islam in Iraq and Syria. 300,000-400,000 have died. But now I'm doing this program today. Tomorrow I'll be back in Virginia Dam in Ohio. And in this environment, I'm surrounded by Muslims. There is a huge Islamic center not far from my house. I can't go anywhere without seeing women playing a Muslim dress-up. 2 doors down was a Muslim family. Muslims lived right across the street. They just moved out.
So, this son was really saying, like, the 4 of us here.
Yeah, they're going to fall.
Being poor observant, we have nothing to worry about. And
they're going to be cast down. They're going to prostrate themselves. And many are going to die. And then it says, and many more, many thousands more as a result of your right hand. My right hand is how I prepared. Prophet of Doom. And, it's the evidence that is going to be held against Muslims. But it says, none of this will strike you. I've never had a Muslim hit me. I've had thousands, maybe tens of thousands by now, I don't read their emails anymore, threatened to kill me, threatened to behead me, yet none has touched me. That's the promise.
So he's made good on Psalm 91.
Boy, perfectly. And against extraordinary odds. I don't think that God very often micromanages. I don't think he intervenes in human affairs. I think he is pretty much hands-off and pretty much free will, and I don't think he even knows or gives a hoot about the vast preponderance of people. But if you're going to do something that he wants done, and you're willing to rely on him to get it done, he's going to see to it that you're able to do what he wants.
Well, sign me up. Okay.
Yeah. That's the bottom line here. If you, he is the Father, and as a Father, there are things that he wants to send his sons and daughters out to do, and if you're willing to do those things in accordance with his way, now his way means there's a lot of things you can't do. You know how many partners I had with the Prophet of Doom? I was offered thousands of partnerships.
Oh, okay, all right.
None, not one.
Oh, okay.
One of the things you learn is you never, ever, ever fight fire with fire. You never form an alliance with evil to fight evil.
You're talking about Christian.
The enemy of my enemy is not my friend. And so if you're going to do it God's way, you do it God's way. You don't ever sell out. For example, I could have done television shows so long as I had been willing to soften the appeal. But no. If you're going to do it, you do it his way. And if you do it his way, he'll protect you. But, if you do it to try to make money, it's not going to happen. You do it to try to achieve fame, you're a non-starter. So if you do it his way, he will protect you.
This whole psalm is about protection for those who go out and do this, right?
Actually, no, it's about, I would say half of it is about protection. The other half of it is about empowerment. Remember I had one really tiny request, which is you're the publicist. It's your message. You know who you want to have hear it. I don't want to be in the publicity business because that's my strength. I never want to be comfortable doing what I know how to do. So you got that. That's the minor one. The major one was protection and empowerment. That we would do this together. Mutual support. Mutual that there would be no aspect of this where we were not working together. Because I knew I wasn't qualified. And I thought working together would be fun. So for example, here's one on working together. He says, you will merely observe and study the consequences and the suffering of the guilty and the wicked. And that's really all I did. I merely observed and I studied. You will only look at and evaluate. You will exclusively gaze upon and consider. You'll think about and ponder the proper response with your eyes, the consequence and the suffering of the guilty and wicked. And that's all I did. I never participated in their suffering. I never joined in the wickedness. I was never a victim of their suffering or their wickedness. I simply looked at what Muhammad said and did with my eyes, and what Muslims following his example are doing with my eyes. So I simply observed it and studied it with my eyes. I was never victimized by it. That's a powerful statement.
So that's all I asked you to do to begin with.
Right. Are you? Yeah. But you know, that's the same thing. It's the exact same thing as the Torah. It's just with your eyes, study this material and follow through with the proper response.
Yeah. And perspective is right.
Right. That's correct. And you know, I'm going to tell you that I don't think I could have written Questioning Paul had I not written Prophet of Doom first.
Probably not.
The ploy that Satan uses to beguile, and the kind of people and the strategies that he deploys are so evident in the Quran and the Hadith with Muhammad. They're just it's so obvious what's going on that it makes it possible for you to recognize these in Paul, where he is considerably more subtle and clever. Paul is, I think Paul is an idiot. He said he was insane, and he's right. He was an idiot. And he was a very poor communicator. But nonetheless, he was vastly smarter and more clever than Muhammad. And so it's easy to see in Muhammad. Okay, so
well, he has a Torah training, and he could actually read and write, so he could put together a better package.
Yeah, that's right. One could read and write in several languages, and the other couldn't read or write in any language.
Yeah.
Well, as a matter of fact, the Quran that was handed down in perfect Arabic, which we now know to be Hebrew, couldn't be written down in Arabic because written Arabic didn't even exist at the time that the Quran was allegedly revealed.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's why the Quran is called Quran, because in the 96th surah, which you would think would be the end of the book, but it's actually the first revelation, Muhammad was asked to Quran. And he says, but I'm illiterate. I cannot Quran. I can't read. So the word is read and recite, Qara. And so it was, okay, maybe I can recite because I sure as hell can't read. And that's how that all came to be. So it says, because you, Yahowah, have invoked certainty, appointing and placing by invitation, making available the sheltered sanctuary of the Almighty, your place to dwell together.
Mikvah.
Right back, yeah. It's not only the mikvah, but we can know for certain that God has provided his invitations. If we respond, now, by the time when I was asked to do this, I had no idea what the mikvah was. No idea.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what Yahowah's name was. I didn't know him. But, you know, Abraham didn't know him either when they first talked, and he says, I want you to walk out of Babylon, and we're going to walk together to the promised land. He didn't know him either. Moshe sure as heck didn't know him when they met around the burning top of the mountain. As a matter of fact, Moshe said, okay, let's say I do this. And by the way, I don't want to do it, but let's say I do this. Who are you?
Tell him you are.
Yeah, who am I supposed to tell him you are? And he was too embarrassed to say, hey, listen, who are you? I don't even know who you are.
You got a card?
Yeah, you got a card? But this is Karasim. He says, because you, Yahowah, have invoked certainty, appointing and placing by invitation, by making available. You have called out and cited as the authority the following action in support of your arguments and propositions, to convince and to make the listener feel certain, putting into effect and placing before us an invitation and summons to the creation and establishment of the sheltered sanctuary. And this is the sheltered sanctuary of the Almighty. God has made a home for us. He has invited us to that home. He has issued invitations. He has called us out of this world. He has established times to meet. I happen to be celebrating unyeasted bread as we speak, and celebrated Pesach earlier in the week. God has an invitation. He wants to meet with us.